All right, here we go. After the beat. That's what we call it. We're exclusively on Twitter. It's time to answer some questions. So without further ado, let us answer said questions. Tickets for UFC London go out on general sale tomorrow. They've been on sale since yesterday for like the Fight Club and newsletter people. Again, no main event announced. Stand by for that one. Although it's likely Manuel versus Blachowicz, wrong, will be. Should UK fans expect better? Now let's go to the next tweet because the first two tweets actually are tied to each other. This is the second one. It's sort of a two-parter. With London tickets going on sale without a main event, do you think this will become more commonplace? And at this point, are people just buying tickets because of the three letters instead of a quality card? So, in the last 2 hours, they actually did come up with a main event. It's a day late as far as tickets going on sale, but it's Fabricio Verdum versus Alexander Volkov, which I think is actually a pretty important and solid fight in the heavyweight division. That being said, London fans, and this is no typical, like this is not the UFC going to, you know, City X in America. The London fans get very excited about their sort of yearly visit to London. It's a big arena, it's the O2. They were very anxious about this. Where's Darren Till? Where's Michael Bisping? Why aren't we getting a good card? The card itself is very weak. And now they got Verdum versus Volkov. So let me alter this question a little bit. A, should they be okay with that? Is that a suitable main event? And B, this practice, this is now the third time in 2018 alone where they go on sale with tickets without a main event. Is this troubling? Is the UFC just trying to say like, hey, the UFC's in town, come to the show? Are they misreading the audience? The audience needs a main event to get excited about or a good card to get excited about. What do you make of this? Because they didn't do this in the past. Like they didn't go on sale without main events. What do you make of this new practice?
Well, first of all, I love the premise of the question. Like, as UK fans, should we feel we deserve better? Like, what's that supposed to mean? as New Jersey fans, you're just fans. Like, there's nothing special about you other than that.
They're boisterous.
Well, they have high. Look, I don't think they're wrong to any UFC fan for any territory, for any card, has a right to expect a UFC level main event, and I suppose to some extent it is. But to your point, given that there's Paul Daly out there, or potentially out there, or would they do business with a guy like that? And they've shown in times past they've cut off their nose to spite their face to preserve some of these disputes with fighters. But I mean, it's quite clear to me what's happening here. They just have this desire. Well, we've created a bit of a market here in the UK. We need to revisit it. Do we have the resources to properly staff a card? No, you quite clearly don't, not according to any kind of common standard of excellence that the UFC is historically known for. So let's do the next best thing and put what we can on there. It's really just a matter of the business side says we're going to go to these cities. They tell the fight side what to do, and they do their best with the available resources. The problem is there's not enough to go around to meet the larger business demands. So no.
Where did Bisping fight Gastelum? Where was that at? Somewhere.
China.
So, I mean, that fight belonged in China like the Verdum fight belongs in London. And if he doesn't
remember, Gastelum
of course.
was supposed to fight Anderson.
Of course. I'm saying it's like it's a domino effect, right? Because all of a sudden Bisping goes and takes this short nose fight, gets knocked out. Now it's like kind of like he can't really fight on this. So that's why I felt like was a big, piece of this was it just seemed like, hey, you just got knocked out. How are you going to be on that London card? It's one of those weird things. I do feel a little bit because, even in Canada, like we were up in Montreal, I think, for the last fight that was there, and they started off in Montreal so big, and then this cards got worse, and it seemed like the fans there noticed it, and they're like, yeah, look at the card we're getting now. It was the DJ card, which was decent, but it wasn't like the pay-per-view they usually bring there. I feel like it's a little bit of that. I don't know about the ticket sales. This stuff I don't really understand because when the tickets go on sale, I'm not buying tickets based on some letters. I wouldn't just go, there's an NFL game coming to the city. We don't know who's playing yet. You know what I mean? I wouldn't go buy it just for the NFL.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't really do that for the UFC, especially.
But if it only comes once a year and you're a big time fan.
It's also that they're if you're I think that there's a difference between and Luke says, well, if you're a UK fan, it's no different than being like a New Jersey fan. I think what the big difference is if I'm a fan and I live in New Jersey, the UFC comes to the Garden. Maybe ends up in Newark again. They used to come to Atlantic City. They could go to the Barclays Center. They can go to Philadelphia. It's not that far to drive up to Boston or up to Albany or to Mohegan Sun. Like you have a lot of different options. So you're going to pick and choose the fight, the place you're going to go because there's a fight that looks appealing. If you're in the UK, you have to travel a lot more in order to see your UFC fights, and I think that as our questioner suggests, I think that people are going to buy the tickets based upon the three letters.
There's one way that you can voice your displeasure. Don't buy the tickets.
Right, but they're showing you what they think of you as a fan base. I mean, you can
they expect them to just buy it.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're surfing off the reputation of those three letters.
Yeah.
And not a whole lot else, at least not for this particular card. Now, you can say historically they've brought some big cards. I'm not trying to demean UK fans. You're right, it's harder to go see things. But they're telling you how much this matters to them. Got to do some of the math here a little bit.
Well, you were there for the Dan Henderson fight that was, what, at 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning? I mean...
No, I wasn't there.
Okay.
I was about to welcome my third child. But yes, that was at 4 in the morning.
So, but I mean, that just, again, like, this is the UK market they take for granted. We'll tolerate that sort of thing, and we'll stay up and watch our traditional pay-per-views out here at what time they're, 3 or 4 in the morning, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That type of thing, so.
I'm curious to see how the ticket sales go because, the UK market these days, Cage Warriors has put on some...
it's good.
Bama has put on some good fights. Bellator has, Bellator brought Rory versus Paul Daly there.
And you had Scott Coker, which I don't quite understand the strategy other than saying, we went to Europe a lot last year, we're going to go even more next year. They like Europe right now.
Yeah, so I'm really curious to see if they finally, because it seems like every year they complain about the card, yet they still show up. So we'll see what the attendance is like for this one. Let's move along. Any update on Rumble Johnson coming back? I have an update, and I want to get your take on said update. I'm told that Rumble Johnson is pursuing a career, or at least mulling a career, in bodybuilding. And I wanted to get Luke's take on that.
Okay, so this is a legitimate question because the world of bodybuilding is divided into two. Well, not just two, but more. Does he intend on being a natural bodybuilder or a...
I don't know that. I didn't even know.
Because you cannot win without taking steroids. It's not possible unless you do the natural
Wait,
side.
is there like a steroids league?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to win any of the big trophies, if you want to win at the Arnold, the Olympia, no, of course they don't test. Or if they do, it's sort of like...
it's like pro wrestling.
Right, it's sort of utterly irrelevant.
Yeah.
And there's different kinds of competition.
And then there's a clean one.
There's natural bodybuilding competitions as well. And there's different kinds. There's classic physique, like a Jeremy Buendia, or you could be like a Ronnie Coleman, who's the one who's a big freak. But the point being is, depending on what kind you're doing, will dictate your drug regimen. So
I didn't know enough to ask those follow-ups.
Bodybuilding is one of the few sports that gets it right, if you want to call it a sport at all, because they basically say, look, if you want to juice to the tits, you can do it. You can do it over here, and if you don't, you can do it over here. Now, there's always going to be hazards in the natural because you're going to get a guy who wants to cheat in there.
Yeah.
But you at least segment out a whole bunch of people who don't mind all the drug use, and I feel like that's actually the best way to do it.
Huh.
Well, also not hitting each other. So I guess
that's important.
But they're taking bus loads.
I thought all those cats were natural, man, watching those competitions.
Yeah. I guess the question I had before you enlightened
that's the most critical question.
No, I know. I didn't know that. I just wanted to know if you saw that in him. Like, if you think that he has what it takes.
If you get the right diet, you get the right training. He's a little bit older, but if you take the right drugs, depending on the right circumstance,
prayers,
you can't win without drugs. I'm not even. I mean, I'm not demeaning him. I'm not. It's just not possible. You have to do the drugs. So.
That'd be a hell of a transformation from the guy who was whittling down to the welterweight all the way to like the huge fucking bodybuilder. 270
pounds.
Yeah, those guys like Kai Green and whatnot. I mean, partly it's just genetics. Does he have like the kind of proper genetics for it?
I guess the big question is, will Rumble Johnson be accepted in the bodybuilding world better than Ronda Rousey in WWE?
It depends on how he does. I mean,
I'm just kidding.
Well,
is there a lot of money in this? I mean, is there
in natural bodybuilding? Not really, but if you get sponsorships, it's not so bad. But at the high end of normal bodybuilding, it can be.
Wasn't he going to work in cannabis or something? Wasn't that like the?
Well, that's just a side gig.
All right,
it's an investment.
All right.
Tell that to the good people of Denver, Colorado. Who have lots of money now.
All right.
The answer is he could do it, but there's a lot of questions about how he's going to do it.
Okay, fair enough. Stay tuned. We'll follow up on that.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. How do you predict the recent Thursday Night Football deal with Fox impacts the pending TV negotiations for the UFC? Does the PFL deal have a major impact as well? So if you missed it, yesterday Fox announced that they got the Thursday night package. It's around $600 or so million. And earlier this week, PFL announced that they've re-signed with NBCSN, also an international deal with Facebook. I don't think that deal has anything to do with the UFC deal, and I still want to really kind of see the
how much they're actually making.
Yes, exactly. The Fox one is interesting, though, right? I mean, that's a pretty big investment. You hypothesize that the Fox, the Fox getting into that and acquiring that package of Thursday night leads to the matchmaking for the Fox. I don't know if that's true, but I do think that there is some kind of correlation that can be had.
I'm guessing if it was announced yesterday that these guys have been in negotiations for a while, and that might have leaked into the conversations that they were having with the UFC, and the UFC might have said, well, hey, we're not going to be signing with these guys again, so, why feed them? But I do think, like we said during the show, it doesn't necessarily help the UFC to have bad Fox cards. So I don't really understand the permutation of it. But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that it's going to relate because it's one. I mean, I'm assuming that this maybe takes them out of the UFC business. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, one of the reasons they were so big on having UFC was because they wanted to have content for Fox Sports 1. How much of FS1 is going to get NFL stuff? I mean, is there?
But they also have a budget, right? They can be spending like billions and billions and billions of dollars.
But they also the impact may be that they still do some kind of deal, but it's for a much more modest deal.
More modest than they have now. Like the deal now is
I find the numbers on this one amazing, right? So I think 2014, $37.5 million a game for Thursday Night Football for CBS. All the while it's simulcast on NFL Network. Then I think in the last 2 seasons it was split between CBS and NFL at $42.5 million a game. Now it's going to be about $60 million a game. That doesn't include the digital rights. $10 million first on Twitter, now $50 million on Amazon. Here's the point: the ratings have gone down the entire time. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about this sports right bubble. Where's it going to pop? I mean, I agree with you that it looks like this is unsustainable, and yet it keeps sustaining itself. Amazing. I actually asked Sports TV Ratings on Twitter. It's a guy who...
He's great.
And I asked him what he thought of it, and he goes, just a hunch, but my hunch is that it won't change what Fox was going to give the UFC, but it will change WME's perspective about what Fox should be offering, which in other words means it'll exacerbate tensions even more.
I don't think, just based on conversation I've had, I don't think they're going over 200 million. And other people have reported this as well. I think SBJ and Darren Ravel as well. The UFC was looking initially for 400 million. Where are they going to get that extra 200 a year? I think it's an interesting thing. Also, the fact that PFL didn't end up on Amazon, because I know that they wanted to be on Amazon, does that lead to the UFC getting on Amazon? Is Amazon not going to get into the... Because I feel like everyone wants to be on Amazon. Someone might end up there. PFL really wanted to end up there. They end up on Facebook. Like this whole TV, like this year alone, I'm so fascinated by this story. And
did you see this story in the Hollywood Reporter? I love this story. It's a little bit different because it's not quite related to sports, although Showtime does a little bit of sports. But they asked basically people on the production side who shop shows, which networks are the easiest to deal with. They went all the way from YouTube to Showtime to HBO, A&E, MTV, like everyone.
Okay.
Everyone that puts it on. The number one was Showtime, and at the very bottom was YouTube, MTV, and Amazon.
Number one meaning the easiest?
Easiest and the best to work with and had the best reputation was Showtime.
Interesting.
And it's like, why is the UFC clearly feuding with who everyone in the industry prefers? It makes no sense.
That's fascinating.
But there you go.
All right. Let us move along. What else do we have? Who should Nate Diaz fight in his return if it's not Conor McGregor? So since he announced that he wanted to come back on Instagram via social media, it's really been a 2-horse race, and I'm kind of surprised, I don't know about you guys, that more people haven't tried to get in on this. It's been Eddie Alvarez and Kevin Lee. Eddie Alvarez says, I want to fight him, but I'm calling BS on his, his big announcement. He only wants to fight Conor, and he's only coming out now because Khabib and Tony are out of the picture, so that kind of opens up a direct path to Conor. So do you guys believe what Eddie Alvarez is saying? And if you don't believe what Eddie Alvarez is saying, who do you think he should fight? Jeff, do you have a take?
I do believe that that's who, I do believe that that's who Nate is talking to. I mean, that's who he wants to fight, because obviously he wants to make some money, and if you're going to make money, that's the best place. Unless he's going to take on Floyd Mayweather in the octagon, I think that's where his cash is. But if that's not going to be the case, I mean, I'd be fine with either of those guys that are in the picture right now. Probably. I don't know. I think that the Alvarez fight, maybe there'd be a little bit more heat involved. I don't know. I think it would be, but either one would be fine. I mean, I think this, whatever happens, if Nate doesn't get Conor, then we get to really find out all that stuff we've hypothesized, whether Nate Diaz is that transcendent star on his own, or does he need Conor McGregor to be a star? Well, so this would be an example. You need to have him in there with somebody who's got enough name recognition and has been out there enough that lends a little bit of a hand. But Nate has to be the lead guy.
Nate's a bit of a bigger thinker than we sometimes give him credit for, and you always wonder if something like, so he's linked to Conor McGregor, obviously pretty hardcore, as we're still even in 2018. But Conor McGregor, took out Eddie Alvarez pretty easily in a big fight. Is it you wonder from his perspective, like, do I want to fight the guy who, my arch rival, the guy that I really want?
Yeah, but Eddie brought it up himself. RDA beat up Nate.
It's
and
true.
He beat up RDA.
You can do this math. I'm just saying those two very specifically in their own little rivalry. I don't know. I would like to see it, honestly, because I think Eddie Alvarez is one of those guys who landed on his feet from something that could have been really tragic for his career. He was able to put it back together, and he's right back to being Eddie Alvarez, man. To me, that would be a really good fight. But the Kevin Lee thing, he's such a good talker, too. And in some ways, I'm like, at this point, it's kind of a twofold thing. You want to see Nate fight because he brings it. But at the same time, the buildups are really, every time there's a Diaz involved, it's those buildups. And I feel like Kevin Lee would probably give him the better of that.
I mean, I just think it goes back to the age-old question of, like, at what point are you demanding too much as a way to not take a fight? Because from what I've heard, that he is willing to fight other people, but only on certain financial terms. And so the question you have to ask yourself is he putting this number so high that he doesn't get it, or is he actually perfectly willing to do them and thinks he's also entitled to this money? And it's just depending on where you come down in that situation.
Okay. All right. What else do we have? That's our weekly, by the way, Diaz question. True or false? It's a weird spelling of false. If the UFC collapses, MMA as a sport would tumble along with it.
That's a really upbeat question.
Yeah.
Wow.
I got a lot of this week, by the way.
I like how he spelled false, too.
Yeah.
Just like true.
So what do you think?
False. It would be probably irreparably damaging. It's hard to imagine any kind of scenario where, I mean, it might exist on a regional level.
We're too far along in the game.
Yeah.
There's too many good fighters out there. Even if, some...
But you have to ask yourself, you keep making this about, like, the UFC in particular are doing something, rather than if the UFC can't make it, who can? That would be the issue.
It would also depend on why they collapse. I mean, do they collapse because a fighter dies in the cage, or do they? I mean, it depends on what it is that causes.
NASCAR has survived that.
The NASCAR's audience is dwindling, actually.
Okay, but I'm just saying, like, Dale Earnhardt died, and they didn't collapse after that, right? That was
but that was almost like a
years ago.
sanitary death, because you didn't really get to see the graphic details of it. There's still this open question about what what happened if somebody took an elbow and then never woke up, right?
Okay. Yeah. So you guys think that if the UFC, for some reason, whether it's bad business or a tragedy, if they collapse, if they cease to exist, the sport will go along with it?
Again, not completely.
No,
I don't think it would go away, but not in the way we understand it.
There's too many people. There's too many gyms. There's too many coaches. It's like it's too all over our culture now.
Yeah.
I feel like that you would still have it, but it's at what level? I don't understand. Like that would be really weird. The UFC got to where it is with the people, the right kind of combination. A couple of billionaires who came in and fed it. Dana White being this perfect salesman.
Yeah.
So it got to that. If you take all that away, obviously we're already kind of in that space where you're starting to take that away. But you take away the letters, because that's what they basically built. I'm not sure what it would exist as. I can't imagine another organization, honestly, being anywhere near as big, though. It's hard for me to imagine that.
Yeah, if the organization were to collapse because of some sort of financial disaster, something happens, the WME people just something happens where they just all go bankrupt, or something happens but it has nothing to do with some dangerous, catastrophic thing that happens inside the octagon, then I think it would move on under the auspices of somebody else. Maybe Bellator would become or maybe somebody, who knows? Somebody would.
I feel like it's a little wishful thinking. I mean, I don't want to say that DC versus Stipe leads to this. That's not what I'm saying at all. But one of the points that I raise in some of my concerns is that people just feel like these institutions will carry on and take care of themselves. No, they will not. No, they will not. You have to do the work every day and month and week and year to make sure that these institutions are preserved, that the UFC stays healthy, that divisions are maintained. They will not take care of themselves, and if they don't, then I think some of the consequences can be pretty dramatic.
And if the UFC is very dominant in the sport, but it's not the NBA, it's not the NFL. I mean, imagine one of those organizations collapsing. Well, where's the structure that's going to sustain things? There is some other structure on a much smaller scale but there is some other structure in MMA.
Okay. Let us move along. Just a couple left here. Which other platforms, other than Fox, would you like to see UFC fight nights on? Netflix, Hulu, Fight Pass. Do you feel like this is the future? Like, are you basically? I think the question is like, do you guys use these other things at all? You do.
Well, Netflix, I do.
You're a big Netflix
and it's
guy?
funny. I almost threw out the joke of Netflix being a landing spot. At some point, you start to look at all their exclusive and original content, and you wonder at what point do they want to be involved in sports or something like that. So, I mean,
you would like that?
I wouldn't. I mean, honestly, I don't know. It's hard for me to like process all of that, but ultimately, it wouldn't matter to me on some level. I'd be like, as long as people are able to watch it, I'm like,
There's
I'd be
still
okay
some
with
prestige with being on like television.
That's true.
No?
But the prestige they're building in those, the things like Netflix and things like that.
There's none at all.
I mean,
I know you're one of those cord cutter guys.
No. It's not even about that. It's like this argument about prestige to be on certain platforms is so overstated.
Really?
Yeah, it's not that it's not true. It's like in the end, how much better is that than being in a
If
place
the UFC
where
ended up on ESPN, you don't think that would be a little bit?
Well, that's also because you have this dramatically improved platform over
No,
Fox
but there's
Sports 1.
prestige to being on ESPN for the UFC.
Okay, but here's to your point. Let's say they end up on Netflix. To me, let's say that lacks prestige. You also have a platform where now people in the 18 to 29 demo spend a significant chunk of their entertainment time. I'll take that sustainability over the fart smelling that goes on in Connecticut
panache.
over in ESPN.
The World Series of Fighting was on NBC, right? That's like
all the prestige.
It was such
all the prestige.
All right. I feel like you're more of a Hulu guy, Jeff.
You know what?
does like that.
Hulu is one that I don't really.
Really?
I get Netflix. I do Amazon
Roku?
Prime.
Roku?
Well, I have a Roku TV,
do?
so yeah. So
But Roku's different than. I mean, you can put Hulu on Roku.
yeah.
okay.
So I mean, I don't get. I mean, I guess it's Hulu Plus or whatever it is that we have to subscribe.
Yeah.
I get whatever I get the free stuff on Hulu.
Okay, YouTube TV and Slang.
Is
But
YouTube
Amazon
good?
Prime would be Amazon Prime. You mentioned Amazon earlier.
good one too, yeah.
Amazon Prime would be a fine
that'd be-
landing
What about
spot.
Ion?
Ion.
That one channel? That was
Remember they had like one of
Yes,
those.
that was great.
Like clicking up and down, trying to find the damn thing.
I
like
believe
everybody's
it was
got
UFC
Ion.
125, and it was also UFC 140, I believe, was on was the
look at
last prelim
Wow.
of the Spike era. So yeah, I've never used YouTube TV, but it is very intriguing.
It's good. The only
It's not a thing that you buy though, right? It's an online.
you can have an app on your phone, or you can put
Interesting.
it's TV.
How much is it?
$35 a month. You can have up to
35 a month?
Yeah, and
Damn.
Can't beat that.
And here's the best part about it: unlimited DVR. You can DVR however much you want.
And you get live sports.
Yep. And for me, I get my local Comcast affiliate, so I can watch the Wizards, Nats, Caps, and of course.
So you get to see all the loser teams.
I get to see all on one platform.
Wow, that is amazing. All right.
Wait, what team boat raced the Knicks last night?
With UFC 226 potentially having 3 title super fights, would you be in favor of having non-title super fights? See, you thought I was going with a redundant question here, but once we're going super fights, like, are you just in favor of opening up the divisions now? Like, let's go, as this man mentions, Rockhold Verdum. Let's go.
I'd be more in favor of Rockhold Verdum than the other ones.
Okay.
Because of how little. Well, Rockhold's now in a title
there's
fight,
no-
but assuming he wasn't in a title picture,
yeah.
I'd love that way more because you could just have fun with that.
There's no ramifications.
Totally.
So
Or
what-
Michael Bisping versus Jorge Masvidal.
Yes.
That's the fight.
It is
should be
funny
happening.
that we stick to the divisions when it comes to the non-title fights, but when it comes to the title fights, it's like chaos up there.
There's something really fun always about like a partition
Champions.
coming down,
Right.
where like some guy who's existing in a top 5 space, and there's another guy who you'd never contemplate in a million years, and suddenly they have a beef.
Sure.
Like those things are always fun, and I wish sometimes you could see them as long as it's feasible. So yeah, I guess I would like to see.
I guess
that
we'd like
more.
to see someone climb the ladder, and if
Yeah.
they kind of go here, it's hard to.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's all just chaotic. So why the hell
is.
not, right?
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while there may be one of these fights that makes some sense. I mean, I think that we've talked enough about the title fights, the champ versus champ fights, to acknowledge how much they made sense for both guys.
Yeah.
I don't know whether there are that many non-title fights that really make sense for the athletes, because if they're the best fights for those guys would be against somebody who's going to get them into a title shot. At least that's in the old school the way of looking at things, like I do. But maybe that's
You're not tying anything up if you put 2 random guys in there. So I think that's the positive. for it,
CM
right?
Punk, Floyd Mayweather.
Yes.
Book it.
All right. What
You know
else?
what?
What else?
I think you got something.
That would be fun.
Pay for that.
If today was the last day that you can watch MMA ever again, what past fight would you choose to watch as your final fight?
Jeez.
What kind of a question is that?
I told you there's a lot of doom and gloom this week.
Jesus.
Anything come to mind?
I like how it's like a question of Sophie choice. You had to give up your daughter or your son to the Nazis. Who would you give up? I would say the same one that I always say. I have a very fond memory of this fight because I was, I'll never forget, I was in a bar called Summers in Arlington, Virginia. I was moving into my new home, and it was my last day there. And I was watching with other fight fans I just met that day, and it was Carl Parisian, Diego Sanchez. It's one of my all-time favorite fights. And I'm not declaring to you it's the best fight in the world, but to me it has sentimental value. I thought it was an incredible action fight. And just the way Diego kind of persevered and stuck it to him when Conor was the man.
It's a great fight.
I have a lot of sentimental value for that one.
That's a great fight.
Man, that's a toughie. I mean, if I'm just going with my favorite fight, I'd probably still go with Gustafsson-Jones. I mean, just the way it played out, like I've talked about this on this show a million times, but just the way it played out, you just don't get that many plot twists in a fight usually where there's just so much and the champion having to kind of rise up after being hurt and all that stuff. So I'd still probably go with that one. I mean, there's a lot of fights that you like in that way. Like you see it and there's some special memory to it, but in terms of just the fight itself that made you feel all kinds of ways, you know, that was still my number one.
It's funny, that's the fight that I thought of, but the only way that I would want to see it again is if part of the scenario was that, you know, I also, whatever, I have some amnesia, so I don't even know what's going to happen, because if I watch that fight now, all those twists and turns aren't as interesting to me because I know in the end.
Put yourself back in that moment.
But if part of this is you can take some past fight that you either didn't see or that you can forget that you saw, yeah, that would be certainly the best one.
78, he wants to see it.
Bisping Evans. No,
Yeah, I mean,
I know. Rousey, Holm, and then Rousey Nunes.
Oh, yeah. Those are good ones. I thought you were going to say Caleb Starnes, Nate Quarry.
Oh man,
That feels like if you're going to go out, you might as well just go out. You know.
Well, I would if I don't get to have some time machine that allows me to not know the result, then I would have to actually pick a fight that I didn't see. So it'd be something from like UFC 4 or UFC 5 or something like that.
Okay, 2 quick ones we got left. Here we go.
Very quick. I gotta get uptown.
Yeah. What is your favorite city to travel to cover fights?
To cover fights.
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. I like to travel on the Red Line downtown. I don't really have a favorite city to travel. I like to come to New York City. New York City is maybe my favorite city in the world.
I mean, going to places like New Orleans is always fun, but honestly, I love Montreal. I like going up to your hometown.
Yeah,
I always find that to be a cool experience.
I haven't got to travel like
you're taking my answer. But Montreal, I'll say Montreal and Toronto. I like both those places a lot, and especially if it's not in the dead of winter, because especially in Montreal, when I've gone up there and it's been.
I'm interested in yours.
This season is such that I can walk around the city and not freeze my ass off.
Abu Dhabi, Sydney. Which one is it, man?
Also the strip clubs in Montreal.
Yeah. So let's go 4 votes for Montreal.
And I can also drive there. I mean, I like that I can drive from my house to Montreal and go through the beauty, stop in Vermont. I mean, it's like it's an awesome trip.
People always are like, "Oh, how's Vegas? You get to go to Vegas." I'm like, "Man, I don't even go out of the hotel. It's usually all so self-contained."
There is something to be said for familiarity.
True.
In Vegas.
That's true. Vegas is an armpit.
Oh my God. Okay, and last but not least, as Ariel has previously mentioned on the MMA Hour, he always orders matzo ball soup if he sees it on the menu. That is a true statement. So, where can one find the best matzo ball soup?
You just put this question for you.
Well, no, I want to know in case I haven't had matzo ball soup.
That's easy.
Please, I'm a huge matzo ball soup fan, so I want to know.
Well, it's my mother-in-law's house. I mean, whenever we have some, I'm not Jewish, so I didn't grow up. I didn't eat.
You guys lived in.
I did not grow up eating matzo ball soup.
Jerry's and Solly's, both of those 2 places.
I've never had it. Where?
Both of them are very good.
Where's
They're both in Southern California. Next time, in the Valley.
I have terrible news for you. I don't like matzo ball.
Poutine and matzo ball soup.
Poutine is overrated, but not bad. Matzo ball soup is
you like
just...
crepe lock too?
Crepe lock's not bad. It's not my,
They do have good crepe lock.
I look forward to matzo
ball. Do you guys have a thing that if it's on the menu, you have to order it?
Gefilte fish.
Yes.
Honestly, I thought that was the question. I didn't even read the whole thing.
If they have hanger steak and chimichurri,
you got to get it.
I got to get it.
Never had both of those.
No.
No, I've never had both of those.
You've never had chimichurri?
No.
Whoa.
I don't even know what that is.
What?
Yeah. What is chimichurri?
Chimichurri is it comes from Argentina. It's a
chimichanga?
No, oh my God.
I have had chimichanga.
It is
it's
olive oil. It's olive oil and parsley kind of dressing. Not dressing exactly, but you put it on red meats, for example. It's got a little bit of a vinegar taste to it. But here's a mention: the Argentines all have their own twist on it at every home you go to, and they all have a secret recipe. So if you know any Argentinian people, each family will have a different one, and they're all fire.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys have one?
What?
Chimichurri.
A thing that you have to order if you see it on the menu.
I mean, Not really. I really don't.
You guys.
I go specifically, like, if you have something you know at a place, you go there for it. But there's not something I show up and I'm like, oh, they have this. I always order this.
Really?
All you can eat at the strip bars in Montreal.
Yeah.
You're opening yourself. You're opening yourself. You love matzo ball soup, and I've been with you where you've ordered it, and you're opening yourself to disappointment. You know,
No, I just want to try. I want to try every variation of it.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I'm more along the lines of if I go to there are certain restaurants that I go to where I don't even need a menu because I am going to have the exact same thing every single time and not venture away because it's so damn good.
The tater tots at Camelot's on M Street. You're in D.C., you know what Camelot's is.
Oh, that was actually a serious statement?
It's a
I
real,
thought that was a
Camelot's is a real place.
He doesn't like matzo ball soup, but he likes tater tots.
All right.
I've been thrown out of.
Why? Tell us.
A buddy of mine got back from Iraq, had a bunch of money to burn.
Okay.
And he said, come with me. But when I showed up, he was hammered already and probably didn't behave himself inside the strip club, so we got tossed fast.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're eating tater tots in a strip club?
Yes.
I like that you have
All you can eat.
You have
Jeff
to be somewhere,
Wagenheim.
and you had to tell that story.
Hear that full story, watch after the beat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a true story.
That one.
I got
See, I
thrown
told
out.
you, things get crazy. All right, we're out of time. Thank you so much for watching. By the way, Eagles, Patriots.
Yes. I'm rooting for concussions.
Okay.
Go New England.
Yeah. Really?
Go New England.
Oh, yeah,
Nobody
'cause
but the
of
Giants should be able to
Giants
beat
thing.
the Patriots in the Super Bowl.
Okay. We are now officially out of time. Enjoy the big game on Sunday. Also enjoy the fights on Saturday, UFC in Belém. It's Belém, as Guilherme Cruz told me. It's
he out
Belém,
there?
not Belém.
Yes.
Belém. Yes,
Well, that's
yes,
where the
yes.
accent mark is over there.
Exactly. All right. Thank you so much for our crew in the back, for Luke, for Chuck, for Jeff. I am Ariel. Appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the fights this weekend. We'll see you next week.